What's going on? Art of Combat Podcast, Woodward Sports MMA on this snowy, but we could have more snow Monday. I'm okay with it. I'm Art, Woodward Sports. We have Mike Broadwell. I call him Broadwell, one of the MMA fans, super fans around here.
Stepping in at the last minute. This is like a fighter taking a fight on like 8 days' notice or something, right?
I literally said to Broadwell, I said, hey, you like MMA, right? He's like, I love MMA. And all we do is talk MMA when we talk. So I figured, why not bring you on the show? And we've got a lot to go through. What's funny about MMA in the UFC world is it never ends.
No.
There's always something to talk about.
The last, 2 weeks where there haven't been UFCs on Saturday night, I haven't known what to do with myself. It's weird.
Yeah. There's no seasons. There's no, delay in games. I mean, unless, COVID comes through and wreaks havoc on a card, it's really business as usual. It's somewhat weird to have this delay and no fights, but there's still plenty of news coming out.
Yeah, I'm excited for the 3 fights in a week.
Yeah. We're going to cover that and a lot more. Obviously, we have a lot to talk about, and I think the biggest news over the weekend is the situation with Mike Perry. If you haven't checked out the video that I'm going to refer to.
Oh, my God.
I just showed it to Broadwell, and I will tell you this, it is very gruesome.
Gross.
It is a lot of blood. So if you're squeamish when it comes to blood, if you're squeamish when it comes to injuries, for one, you're probably not an MMA fan, but also shouldn't watch the video.
But what happened there? Did he kick the window out?
Yeah, so it's Sunday night. I'm scrolling through Instagram, scrolling through Twitter, and all of a sudden I see everyone's favorite neighbor, Mike Perry, post a video. And I always watch Mike Perry videos because they're either hilarious or they have that wow factor to them. And
He's definitely been punched in the face too many times.
So this video, it started, if you go through his Instagram story, which I don't know if it's since been deleted, but it's all over YouTube. It was him and his girlfriend Latoya, or I should say corner woman Latoya. Drinking on a boat, and I don't think she was drinking, obviously, because she's pregnant, but he had the bottle of Patron, it looked like, and he was tipping a couple back. There was another video of her laying on the boat, and she looked very pregnant, as what happens when you're months along in pregnancy. And then there was a video of Mike Perry going, ugh, and then he turns the camera, and it's a broken window from a door. And then
it's high up, too.
Yeah.
I mean, he must have jumped.
I don't know if he jump kicked it or if he definitely kicked it, because the next view was him sitting in a pool of his own blood and him literally saying, I don't know what the fuck I'm going to do now.
Bleed out. That's what you're going to do.
Seriously. There was videos posted afterwards of him getting stitched up by the doctor. Mike Perry is one of those people. I mean, he's got a record of 14-7. He hasn't done the best in the UFC, but he's a draw.
Yeah. He goes in there and just throws hammers and he goes for it. So you love watching a guy like that, but I mean, the last time when his nose got flattened and stuff, and some of these fights, I'm just like,
he's very Justin Gaethje-like.
Yeah.
To where he just puts his head forward.
Only he doesn't win.
Yeah, except he doesn't win. And I hate to say it because, Perry's technically a Flint native. He's from Flint, Michigan. He spent a lot of time in Florida. But what do you have to say when he does these Conor McGregor antics? I mean, we witnessed it with the situation in Texas in July at a steakhouse where he punched an old man in the face. It seems like alcohol fuels a lot of these.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's the kind of guy the UFC doesn't want to admit, but they like having him around, whether he wins or loses. Because he is going to create news and he's interesting and fun to watch.
Yeah.
So.
Do you think that the UFC will help him with this? Because I look at it as, the man has had multiple issues now. He claimed that he was a percentage enough of African American to where he could say the N-word. I mean, it's a history of just you don't know if it's Diego Sanchez level of CTE, but it's getting there,
Yeah, and at some point, when you see injuries like he had in knockouts like he's taken, the UFC, Dana White, he's the kind of guy that at some point he does say, I'll book you another fight, but I really don't want to.
Right.
And I think it's going to come to that with Mike Perry.
We witnessed that with BJ Penn. I mean, we've witnessed that with BJ Penn. We witnessed that with so many legends. And, that's just inside the ring. I mean, BJ Penn outside the ring was very similar to Mike Perry in the sense of getting into bar fights or restaurant fights and creating this shit show outside of the octagon that doesn't create job security for you.
Right. Dana White's got to be getting close to that point where he's got to say, we got to be careful with your life from here on out.
Right. And it just becomes a point to where it's enough is enough. When do you get to a level of, hey, we've had enough. And I feel, you look at some fighters like Conor McGregor, I feel like Conor McGregor could go in the middle of the street, murder someone, and he would still be booked for a pay-per-view next week.
Of course.
Like, he's Conor McGregor.
Yeah. Yeah.
But when you look at Mike Perry, and I mean, you just lost to, Tim Means, and, you've got these wars. Perry is very much like a roll the dice fighter. You don't know if he's going to perform well. You don't know if he's going to bring a corner. You don't know what his training regimen has been. I mean, it seems like once he realized that the Robbie Lawler fight was off, it was like, oh, well, it's a free-for-all.
And he's been losing to guys that are like in the middle of the pack in his division.
Yeah.
So to me, he's not. The only thing that makes him relevant are these crazy stories.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
and that's the thing too, is like I love trash talk. I love when fighters are at each other's throats, and we're going to talk about that with Jones and DC here in a minute. That feud is still ongoing, but I love that. What I don't love is when it seems like you've been hit in the head so many times that your mental stability isn't all there, and you see that with Mike Perry. You see someone who is damaged mentally because of the wars that they've been in, and people talk about what happens inside of the octagon. What about all the sparring? What about all of the...
Yeah, we don't even know what's going on there.
Right.
We haven't seen... Yeah.
Yeah, so it's one of those situations to where I hope he gets the help that he needs, but I also think that, I hate to say it, but he's not too big of a draw for Dana to come in and rescue him.
No, I don't think so either.
No.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what do you do in these situations? Here's what I see happening. I think if this becomes a domestic violence issue, which it's almost leaning towards that because the man's laying in a pool of his own blood. There's a window that's been bashed. Like, you've seen this before in movies,
Right.
I think if that becomes the situation, there's no way of getting around that or getting out of that.
No. I hope it's not.
Yeah.
But I just saw the video, and it was so shocking.
Yeah.
If you haven't watched the video, watch the video.
You need to watch the video because it really puts things into perspective. I mean, I wouldn't open the show with some, outside of the octagon drama, but in this case, it's like, it was tough to watch because you're seeing the downfall of a person, and you're seeing someone who, regardless of their MMA record, they're still a human being. They're still someone that, truth be told, I love watching fight. I love Mike Perry fights because he's such a character. It's like watching a man literally go to war. Like, he's not going to go in there and half-ass it. And he didn't do that with Tim Means either. Mm-hmm. But you're looking at someone who decided to get rid of their whole corner, get rid of their whole gym, and have their pregnant girlfriend be their corner. And then try and sell their other corner spot. Because if you're unfamiliar in the world of UFC, you can have 3 people in your corner. So he had his pregnant girlfriend, and then there was someone that he grew up with almost, but there was that opening spot, and there was rumors of Darren Till being his cornerman, Kendra Lust, the porn star.
Yeah.
Like, it was a wild world.
That would have been interesting.
Yeah, so when you see like this mentality of like, I mean, and good for him being an entrepreneur and going that route,
Yeah.
But it's
not helping him win, though.
No.
And you don't see any successful fighters in the UFC that their girlfriends are cornering them.
Right. I mean, the only thing similar that I remember,
unless your girlfriend's Amanda Nunez, but
you get
or somebody like that. Yeah, somebody.
But I think of too Eddie Alvarez when he would have his wife, and all you would hear is Eddie. Yeah. Like, she wasn't even allowed to corner him. She was just in the stands, and you can hear her. So I think it's getting involved in those relationships and having those people control your destiny almost. I mean, you're in the UFC. This isn't backyard brawling. This isn't the regionals of the amateurs. Like, this is the pinnacle of fighting, and you're having your girlfriend corner.
Yeah, you're fighting the best fighters in the world, and sometimes you need to know, you don't see a position yourself, and you need your corner man to yell that to you.
Yeah.
And I doubt his, girlfriend has the skills to help him there.
No, I mean, listen, I think in the reality of it, anyone can hold mitts. Anyone can hold pads. Anyone can take body shots with a guard on. It's what you do outside of that. And you even witnessed it with, and I hate to say it, but with the Tony Ferguson and Justin Gaethje fight when Eddie Bravo was in there trying to give Tony advice. And Bravo's got 10th Planet gyms all over the country, and he was having a problem expressing what he needed to do.
Yeah.
So when you get someone who, I've watched my husband or boyfriend fight, and I think I should be a corner. And, the boyfriend or husband's like, yeah, sure. That's when you got to kind of question, like, his mentality. Mm-hmm. Do you think that Dana White reaches his hand out and offers him rehab and pays for it?
I don't know what their policies are on things like that, but he seems like the kind of guy that would do something like that. And Mike Perry's earned that from the UFC. I mean, he's gone in there, and the UFC is all about entertainment, right? And that's why these guys are in the UFC. They're not always the best of the best, guys that can always win.
Yeah.
But they're guys that are going to be entertaining, and Mike Perry has entertained.
Yeah.
And so he's earned it.
He really is a showman. Like, he really is, like, he reminds me so much of Donald Cowboy Cerrone in the sense that, sure, their record isn't the best. I mean, Perry's 14-7. He's had more losses than wins in the UFC, if I remember correctly. But you watch him because you know it's going to be a show every time. The downfall of that is once you get that built in your head, you feel like you're invincible. And then it comes to a point where it's like, man, you just lost to Tim Means, who is an MMA veteran, but it's like, where do you go from here? And then you have all these issues. I mean, I saw another Instagram post from him. He was selling a $30,000 watch and a $50,000 watch, and he had them on his hands, and he's like, I'm selling these. And it's like, that's when you kind of see, like, okay, what's going on here? He said that he had tax issues before. I mean, it's all starting to snowball and come together.
Well, if anything, I hope we're getting Mike Perry more Instagram follows.
Yes, I hope so.
Maybe his UFC career might be near the end, but he's going to have a lot of Instagram followers.
I think you look at what happened with him and Donald Cowboy Cerrone, who submitted him fairly quickly. I think his next best bet is to go to bare knuckle. I mean, when you've got these issues like this, set up Brock Weaver versus Mike Perry and bare knuckle. Like, I would watch it. Two former UFC athletes. They don't have the best records. They've got a little bit craziness going on in them. I would love to see that fight because I think Dana is more likely to cut Mike Perry than help Mike Perry. I think.
Yeah. I mean, Mike Perry, he's down for brutality, so he'll do bare. I'm sure he's the kind of guy that will sign up for bare knuckle.
Speaking of bare knuckle and the other organizations, let's talk about this story. Scott Coker was actually surprised UFC released so many high-profile fighters, but too bad for them, good for us. In a recent interview with MMA Junkie, he went on to say that you're talking about a couple of guys that really have made a difference in their division. I'm surprised they didn't want to keep them. To me, it's a great opportunity for us. He goes on to say, to be honest, I think we're a better fit for those guys. They'll have a great home here. What are your thoughts on Bellator versus the UFC, and is it really a versus? I mean, is it really anything to even compare?
For me, I mean, there's so many fighters to follow and so many fights that it's hard to, keep your eye on all the different things, Bellator, UFC. But I enjoy Bellator when I watch it, and it's not a versus thing. It's just, it's different.
Yeah. Do you think it's compared to almost like college to NFL or semi-pro to pro? Because that's the way that I look at it, but I'm starting to...
I look at it as AAA, like AAA baseball, which is still good. People, if you're a Toledo Mud Hens fan, you get it. You like going out and watching the games and you enjoy them, but these guys aren't going to be the same household names like the UFC makes household names.
Yeah. I think that when it comes down to it, I see what Scott Coker is doing. I don't know if it's the smartest move because what you're doing is you're grabbing, and by no way is Yoel Romero a washed-up fighter.
No.
The man is one of those freaks of nature. So when it comes to someone who can still perform at the age of, I think he's 40, 41, in MMA,
he looks like he's 30.
Yeah,
or 25.
And he's just built differently.
Yeah.
You look at him. You look at Anthony Rumble Johnson. You even look at Miles Fury Jury, who went from the UFC to Bellator.
Roy Nelson.
You look at these fighters, and they still have lengthy careers left in them. Maybe not as much as they did when they were in the UFC. But I think what Scott is doing is instead of focusing on your brand, you're trying to leech off of the UFC and bring that over. And I don't think that you're going to get the fan base that you would if you created a Michael Chandler and kept him.
Yeah.
Losing Michael Chandler, that was, sure, you become a free agent and you can do whatever you want. But I look at it like you need to build a base before just grabbing old UFC fighters.
Yeah, I think the UFC is always going to win with the fan base and always be the biggest thing because they have the ESPN contract. They're on ESPN Plus all the time. They're being promoted on ESPN. Yeah. And it's just like when the NHL left ESPN and they saw what it did to their ratings.
Yeah.
So Bellator's got to find its lane and, get its own fan base, which I think it has.
Yeah. Do you think that there's ever a chance, let's say 10 years down the road, where Bellator is competing face-to-face with UFC? Or do you think it's just never going to happen?
I mean, I think it's never going to happen, personally. I think the UFC just has built this brand where they're in fighting, they're like the NFL now.
Yeah.
And unless somebody gets involved, like what happened with boxing and makes them split it all up where the promoter can't be the what's the term I'm looking for? How the UFC is the promoter and they're like.
Yeah, they're the organization too.
Yeah, where that's not that way in boxing.
Yeah.
Unless the government does something like that to the UFC is going to be this big
And that's
brand.
like the Ali Act then. That's like, when you look at fighters' rights.